Good morning to our Trinity audience. I'm Harry Johnson, and I'm bringing you another video in the series of Tuesday Moments from Trinity United in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Reverend Elizabeth Brown continues on vacation for the balance of this month, and in her stead, Reverend Paul Campbell is providing pastoral duties. The contact information for Reverend Campbell is contained either in the email that accompanies this video or by accessing the telephone system for Trinity. Today, I've got the pleasure of interviewing the Staff Associate for Trinity United, Irma Nadeau. And in a few minutes, I'm going to interrupt Irma in her office and engage her in discussion. Good morning to our Trinity Tuesday Moments audience. This morning, I'm going to the office of our Staff Associate, Irma Nadeau, to ask Irma about some of her activities. I see she's busy at her desk, but I think there'll be time for us, and I'll just move in close and engage her in conversation now. Hello, Irma.
Oh, hi, Harry.
And how are you today?
I'm really good, thanks, Harry. And you?
Oh, fine. It's such a beautiful morning, and yet each of us have some inside work to do as well.
It's a beautiful day for sure.
I came to ask you a few questions. I wonder if you, since you've been in the Staff Associate position for some time now, I wonder if you would tell us about some of the activities that are involved in this position.
Well, you know, if I were to describe this position in a few words, I would say it is one of providing support in really whatever way is needed for the activities here at Trinity, and in particular supporting Elizabeth so that she's freed up to do the ministry work that she's called upon to do for our community of faith. So really it's to provide support for all of the activities where I'm needed.
Well, that sounds like a real team effort. And I wonder if you could tell me what aspects of your position are particularly appealing to you.
Oh, that's an easy one, Harry. Without a doubt, it is the people of Trinity, and this position really connects me to the people in so many wonderful ways. And for me, that is really a great part of this position. And you know, it's been interesting because of course we've been in this pandemic now for, you know, going on a year and a half, and of course many of our activities have changed. And one of the things that I have been able to do is to provide support through Zoom so that we can carry on many of the activities that we were previously doing, and in some ways even have expanded on those. For example, we've had people from out of province that have joined us in various activities, some on quite a regular basis. And so it really feels like those relationships have really had an opportunity to grow and blossom in a way that's been very beautiful.
Well, that is a very wonderful part. It's often said that crisis is the sum of danger and opportunity. And it sounds as if, despite the danger, you and Elizabeth have been able to seize on the opportunities to expand your spiritual reach to people.
That's correct, Harry. I would say that's exactly right. And I mean, it gives us all kinds of possibilities for the future too, even once we are able to meet in person, how we use the online services that we've developed.
Excellent. Now, you have been involved in some specific projects. Perhaps you'd tell me about a project that's been particularly interesting to you.
Well, you know, the one that really comes to mind is a pretty recent project where I was involved with the property committee and with Elizabeth in the whole carpet replacement, chair replacement, vacuum project, and it was such a pleasure to do again some of that support work with the committee in getting this job done, and it was just a really great team effort to get it done within the period of time that we needed to get it done. And except for waiting for the chairs right now, all of the other pieces are in place, and it's really made a difference, I think, in terms of the sanctuary looks so nice, and we can't wait to welcome people back.
Well, that's an excellent introduction to my next line of questioning, because in an interview with Ed Tomofachuk, chair of the Property Committee, he gave credit to you in advancing the carpeted chair project. I want you to tell me about your activities. How did you know which granting agencies to apply to and what to ask for in making your request?
So in terms of the grants, that was very much a joint decision with the whole team, the committee and Elizabeth. Our church had previous experience with grant applications, and so those were really, really useful. So, you know, at the end of the day, we applied to four granting agencies and were successful with obtaining grants from the Cropo Foundation as well as the Building Sustainable Communities, which is a provincial government grant. And in terms of knowing how much to apply for, again, the whole project had been costed out by the team, so we knew what our needs were. We knew at that point how much Trinity was going to be able to contribute to the project, and then we just kind of went from there and applied for so that we would be able to cost or do the entire project.
Well, that's a really wonderful team effort, and each person uses their talents and achieves a goal. You have undertaken a new type of program. I hesitate to call it a training program, but you're in an educational phase in this program. Mm-hmm. Could you tell us about that program?
Yes, so this spring I started a program called the Licensed Lay Worship Leadership Program through United in Learning, and the program has 4 modules in it, and I started with a preaching module, which you can start anywhere in the course, you know, and then so I probably started with one of the more difficult ones for sure. And so in that process, you know, those of you who have been following our worship services would have noted that I did actually deliver 2 sermons, which I had never done before. It was pretty, it was a very in-depth process for me in terms of really, I've got a much deeper understanding of what it takes to do a sermon, and it's hours and hours of work. There's no question about it. But the other thing that happened for me is that I had never read scripture in this way, and really learned that in order to be able to do the sermon, I needed to make sure that that scripture could really take residence within myself before I had any ability to speak about it. And that for me was a new experience in terms of that kind of depth. And then once that had happened, the rest of it kind of flowed through the process that they taught us. And I could tell you the steps. I don't know that it probably would really look too simple if I did that, because each step really has its own work and listening and integrating, you know, to go with it. One of the things that we were told early on in the course, and which I really had to kind of process as well, is that our job is to proclaim what we know, not to convince, interpret, or explain. And in some ways, you know, I really had to listen to that. It felt very freeing, while at the same time, it felt like a very big responsibility, because that is where the really needing to look at the text that I'm going to be preaching about needs to take residence with me before I can know it or proclaim it. And so that was just a very, very important thing to know from the very beginning. And so, as I think about it, to have moved in the 12 weeks, and our group sessions were, and I guess I should say that we were in small group sessions of up to 8 people. Our group had 7 in it because one person decided to withdraw at the end, but there were, I believe, 7 other groups meeting in various, well, we were all meeting virtually, right? So there was over 50 people that were participating in this at the same time, but in our small groups. And so it was a lot of discussion. We posted all of our assignments, and the assignments were pretty in depth on what we called forums, and then we were able to respond to each other's assignments through the course of the 2 weeks before we met again. And we have just completed that process, and so it was just a very it took me deeper than I could have imagined. I had said to someone, the process actually amazed me.
Well, in many ways, you've started to answer some of my next questions about the sermon development process, but you've given us very important messages, getting to know the scripture in this way, proclaiming what you know rather than doing an interpretation. I just wonder too, in one of my questions that I wanted to ask you, which you've probably answered, is was the development of the sermon quite a challenging thing for you to do? And to some extent you have answered that, but I just wondered just how much writhing does one do in the preparation of a sermon? Well,
that is an interesting question. I would say for sure my first sermon, the writhing would not be too strong of a word. I think, and I actually presented 2 sermons in worship for Trinity, but I also did one sermon on Good Friday that we all did just on YouTube. The reason being that Good Friday had already passed by the time we were doing that, but it's so central to our Christian faith that was really an important component for us to struggle with as well, and to, because that's not an easy. Good Friday is really that time of agony, that time of despair, and to stay in that place for a period of time, again, to absorb that so that we can proclaim what we know, was so very important. So I think I've taken you off on a little bit of a tangent here, but I do need to say that the process that they taught us worked well for me. I think maybe for others they might have struggled with it more, but having worked through it a few times now, I feel like I've got tools that I could rely on.
Very good. Well, that's very encouraging and, in a sense, quite self-fulfilling in this process. Let's move on to think about the future a little bit. What are the coming projects to which you're looking forward?
Well, if I think about looking forward, I sort of look towards fall and wonder whether we will be reopening and what that's going to take. We have now been in this mode for so long, and we have learned many things. Some of those things we again need to take to heart and say, what do we do with what we have learned, and how do we incorporate that into our church family? How do we make it meaningful? Because just because we may be able to meet in person again doesn't mean that we necessarily throw out everything that we have done, because we have heard people say that there is some merit in looking at worshiping online, at doing certain activities online. There's some benefits. Certainly we look forward to meeting in person again, but it's going to look different. And I think that's going to sort of be where we need to put our energies in the fall.
Well, that is a really important thought for all of us to contemplate. Appreciate you giving us that. I'd like to wind down our interview and thank you very much for the time you've given us and the thoughts. But I'm wondering, is there a thought for the day that you'd like to leave with us?
You know, we have all been hearing so much tragic news. It's almost hard to talk about sometimes. There has just been so much of it, and I think that sometimes I think it's been made maybe more poignant, maybe more difficult in some ways, because many of us are sitting at home alone watching the news unfold, and we sit with that by ourselves. And that can be, you know, that is really, you know, I think, again, if I refer back to my course, that's a Good Friday experience. And so I think that what I would want to leave with people is, you know, we've been hearing it from our health officials and our provincial leaders. You know, this is, we need to do this a little bit longer. But in that process, you know, I have to believe that love is stronger than hate. And so go forth and love, show kindness in every way that you can, even on those days when we feel stretched, you know, with this aloneness and with this COVID and with the wearing of masks and all that goes with it. Show love, because that is the only way we can counter these kinds of acts of violence. And so, you know, maybe showing love is picking up that phone, giving someone a call, having that conversation, being an encouragement. So that's really, I think, what we as a community of faith can do, and that's really the reason for being.
Well, those are wonderful thoughts to leave with us. And once again, I thank you very much for interacting with us today. And I'd say goodbye and hope the rest of your day goes well.
Thank you, Harry.